This class is concerned with change management and more specifically with Lewin's change model. Let's start by looking at an organization. And an organization has forces for change, forces moving the organizations toward change. It could be market forces or technological forces or various forces that can move an organization towards change the organization. But we also have forces resisting the change. The most obvious force resisting change will be the personnel within the business. People sometimes do not like change and they try to resist the change. So what we've got are driving forces and restraining forces. Forces pushing the organization towards change and forces pulling it back and keeping it where it is. So the forces driving change, and there are forces, as I said, restraining change. Where there is equilibrium between the two sets of forces, there will be no change. So an equilibrium between the two sets of forces means no change. In order for change to occur, the driving force must exceed the restraining force. So this seems to be broadly based on Newtonian physics. But the idea here is that if the forces for change are very powerful, then the change will happen. There will still be resistance to change, but if the forces for change overpower the resistance for change, the change will take place. Now, this is sometimes referred to as force field analysis, and it can be used to investigate the balance of power involved in an issue, to see which is stronger, which is predominant, the forces for change or the forces against change. And they can also identify the key stakeholders on an issue, who's pushing through the change and who is resisting the change. So who are the key stakeholders involved in this whole analysis of change? So it can identify the opponents and the allies, who are with each other, who are perhaps working together to force through the change, and who are together perhaps resisting the change. Who are the opponents and who are the allies? And also can identify how to influence the target groups. So for example, if a target group wants change, how can that target group be influenced? How can that target group be identified and influenced? Who's pushing for the change? What's their agenda? What are they hoping to achieve? How can they be influenced? Who's opposing the change alternatively? What's their agenda? Why are they opposing to change, and how can they be influenced? So it's possible through this type of analysis to identify who's for and who's against the change. Now, the famous model here in the context of change and resistance to change is Lewin's change model. This model identifies three stages in the process of change. First of all, what's known as unfreezing, and we'll talk about this in a few moments, but just for the moment, unfreezing. Then we've got change, and then we've got refreezing. So we have three parts: unfreezing, change, and refreezing. And I'll talk about each of those in a moment. Now, this assists the organization or the organization change by allowing the process to be understood. So when we couch our discussion in the context of this model with unfreezing, change, and refreezing, it allows us to it allows the process to be understood. We can understand where we stand in the context of, is the organization changing or not changing? We have a better understanding of the organization. We have a better understanding of the processes, whether the organization is going through a process of change or whether there is resistance to change or whatever. So we have a better understanding of the organization in the context of this model. Providing milestones for evaluating progress towards change. Well, the model enables us to identify how far the process has gone. If the organization is changing, how much has it changed? By what degree, and what's causing the change? What's the resistance to change? What's the likelihood of it slipping back into its former state? Will it continue to change? Let's start by the unfreezing, change and refreezing process. Let's start by having a look at this and see how this one works. And we'll start specifically with the unfreezing. This is the shake-up phase, perhaps triggered by declining sales or profits. So this is the phase where the organization is going through a problem, it's not performing well, and it needs to be, in common language, it needs to be shook up. It needs to be, something needs to happen, something needs to change. So the organization is not doing too well, it must change. The result is an acceptance that the existing structure and ways are not working. So if the organization has got a problem, first of all, the management must recognize that the existing structures are not working. The company is not performing well. It's not performing well for whatever reason. It must identify the reasons as to why it's not working well, but it must recognize it's not working well. To get people ready for change, it's necessary to develop an awareness of the necessity of change. It's important that the workers and the management within the business recognize the necessity for change. If they don't recognize the necessity, there will be greater resistance to the change. People will say, why are we changing? We don't need to change. So it's important to get the workers and the management within the organization to agree, to understand it's necessary to have the change because the business is not functioning well. It's not functioning as it should. It's also important that the people within the business, the workers, the management and so on, they must understand the nature of the change that's needed. Why does the organization need to change and what sort of changes are required? It may be changes in the product design, it may be changes in the production layout, it may be changes in the customer relations management framework. But there might be some need for change and it must be identified what the need for change is. And what methods are planned to achieve the change? How can the change be, when it's identified, how can it be achieved? How can the change be implemented? What changes are required? And then how can the changes be implemented? And also, when change takes place, it will affect some workers, it will affect some line management and perhaps departmental management and so on within the business. So how are those people affected? And what needs have they got? And how should they be helped during the process of change? It may be by additional training, it may be by reclassifying their jobs, or it may be by restructuring the department in some particular way. But the needs for those who are affected must be identified. The ways that progress will be planned and monitored needs to be set out as well. How will the company implement the changes? How will the changes be planned and monitored? And if there are issues, perhaps shortcomings in the changes that are proposed, how will they be dealt with? How will they be changed and modified so that overall there is more efficiency, the issues that caused the need for change have been addressed, and the people who are working with the changed situation, their needs have also been addressed. So in looking at the idea of change, it's not as straightforward as simply devising a change policy and implementing it. There are many parts that need to be considered. Now, changing, well, this is the process of devising and implementing the change. First of all, what's the problem? There's going to be some change within the organization that's been proposed. It's going to affect some workers and some management. So what's the problem? What's causing the need for the change? Define the problem. And then, having defined the problem, identify the solutions. So the problems have been identified. The problem may be low productivity, poorly designed product, poor dispatch and logistics system, or poor stores management, whatever it is. Then what are the solutions? Identify some solutions that can fix the problem. And identify a strategy to implement the change. Having identified the solutions, how can change be implemented? What's the strategy? How can the strategy be implemented in a way that will take the workers and the management along with it? We will persuade the workers and the management that this is the best policy, this is what is needed. And then finally, implement the solutions. Implement solutions by perhaps phasing them in, instructing the workers as to what the changes are, what the solutions are, retraining the workers if need be, training the management to cope with the new system, the new way of working, and implementing the solution so that it addresses the original problem, but also phases in the solution into the business in a way that's acceptable to the workers and the management. And then we've got refreezing. So we've unfrozen the business. In other words, we've looked at all of the processes within the business, and we've unfrozen them. We have the unfreezing phase. We have said, okay, all of these can be changed. Anything can be changed. It's unfrozen. It's no longer the system. We can change the system, so it's unfreezing it. Then we change it. We change it in line with what we identify what is required. And having changed the system, we now refreeze it. Refreeze it. We establish the routines. We work out what is required from the workers and the management, and we set up the new system which will be followed by the workers and the management. In other words, we have refrozen the business in terms of its processes. The processes are now identified, and that is the work pattern. And that's the way people will work, because this is the new system. This is the process of maintaining the momentum of change. So it's refreezing is the culture of change has now been accepted. The management have unfrozen the business. They have implemented change. They've identified problems. They've identified solutions to the problems. They have solved the problems. Now, the culture of change has now been established within the business. In other words, the workers and the management know that if there's a problem, it can change again. But looking at changes that work, it's important to lock in the solutions. Don't constantly experiment with new ideas. Once one has been found that works and works efficiently, lock it in. Fix it. That's the process. That's how it's done. It works well, it solves the problem, It's locked in. The changes are locked in. And the situation becomes stabilized. Once workers are familiar with the new process after the change, the situation becomes stabilized. It becomes a stable system. The workers are able to work, and the management are able to work with the system. They know the new system, they know it works, they know the problem has been solved. The situation becomes stable. And relationships between the workers and the management, between the workers and the workers, and in a sense between the workers and the system itself, relationships become built and become established. The workers know their place, they know what they're doing, they know how to perform under the new system. Management know the new system, they know the requirements of the new system. So the relationships have been established within the new system. And once everybody is working to the new system, it becomes consolidated. It becomes, that is the system. It's locked in. It's consolidated. And there's also the need for evaluation and support. In the same way as the previous system, the one which was knocked over, the one which was rejected because it was inefficient, the one which was unfrozen and changed, that system needed evaluation and support. This new system, the one that replaced it, will also need evaluation and support. And there's a need to prevent going back to the old ways. The workers must be monitored to make sure that they don't slip back into old practices. This is a new system requiring new practices. Management must be familiar with the new practices as well and must be prepared to ensure that the new practices are implemented and that the workers are supported, trained and guided in delivering the new system, and that the workers don't slip back into old routines, ones which were associated with the system before it changed. The refreezing is complete when the new patterns are accepted and followed willingly. So the company has a new set of routines. These new set of routines are the ones that are followed by all the workers and the management. They're ones which are efficient, and they're ones that have come about because of the old system, which was inefficient, which was rejected. It was updated, and this is the new system. And the new system is locked in. It's now frozen. In other words, this is the system, and these are the routines that will be followed. This is the culture of the new business, the one which has been changed. So that is the nature of the force field analysis. It involves three parts: unfreezing, changing the organization, leading to full change, and refreezing it. So implementing the new system and working with the new system, the new procedures. That's all I'm going to deal with in this session, so we're going to leave it at that and simply say thank you for watching.